How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. We got a scariest stories in Joe Rogan history. This video is made by Jax. Full link of his video is in the link in the description. Make sure you like and subscribe, and let's get it.
These are 5 of the scariest stories ever told on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Starting with the Joe Rogan Experience number 1500.
Oh, sorry, that's my dog in the background. Don't mind her. She's a puppy. But didn't Liver King just get arrested for threatening Joe Rogan on the podcast or something?
16, featuring Post Malone. During this podcast, Post Malone and Joe Rogan get into a discussion about ghosts, recalling ghost stories, and also talking about if ghosts are real or not.
Hunters?
Later, they also discuss a theory.
Dude, I got some crazy ghost stories. I ain't gonna lie, bruh. Okay, so I'm just when I first moved into this new house, there's like woods around my house. First time I went out there was a burnt Ouija board back there. Dead ass. And one time, like, a stool just slid, like, on the concrete floor right next to me. I was home alone. Just slid. And my uncle has some crazy stories, too.
On why places get haunted.
His house is haunted.
Here's the thing about ghosts. There's so many stories of them.
Right.
There's so many.
Right.
Now, is it because people are just scared and their senses are on heightened alert and they...
That's what I think. But nah, there's too many
see things that aren't really there. That could be it,
bro.
Because when it's dark out and you're tired and you're moving through the hallway, first of all,
see things.
You might be half asleep anyway.
You might see things.
But you hear things, you get scared, your senses get really heightened, and maybe you might see something that's not even really there.
What Joe Rogan is describing here is a phenomenon called peduncular hallucinosis. It's a rare neurological phenomenon that causes vivid visual hallucinations that typically occur in dark environments and last for several minutes. There's also something called complex nocturnal visual hallucinations, which is something similar, but this is used to describe the phenomenon of vivid, dramatic, detailed, and often intricate visual hallucinations occurring during...
Dude, I also, when I was younger, I used to see shadow people.
Sleep onset or awakenings at night. These generally last for a few minutes at most and disappear with increased levels of light. So Joe isn't trying to argue that ghosts aren't real. He's just explaining that a lot of ghost stories occur when it's dark. So these two phenomena could explain why a lot of supernatural things are seen when it's dark, meaning that some people who have claimed to see ghosts have actually just been hallucinating.
It's just your own brain and your paranoia with you, because it's always happening at night under low light conditions. It's always weird things that are fleeting and then they're gone.
But it's not always in the night. It's not always in the night.
That stool thing was right
out. Never like at the beach. Is there ghosts at the beach?
There might be ghosts at the beach.
That's
it depends on what beach you're at.
There's no ghosts at the beach.
Joe Rogan is actually wrong here. There are a few beaches around the world that are deemed haunted.
Really?
For instance, the Dumas Beach in India is very well known for its black sand and its reputation for being haunted. Local folklore claims that the beach is possessed by spirits of people cremated there in the past. It apparently was once a Hindu burial ground. Many visitors have heard disembodied whispers, sudden chills, and inexplicable sand movements. But again, most of these stories say that it's only haunted during the night. So is it really haunted, or is it just people who have been hallucinating?
Here's an argument for something being haunted. The comedy store in Hollywood. Because it used to be Ciro's nightclub. It used to be owned by Bugsy Siegel. And apparently, the word is they killed a bunch of people there.
Right.
And almost everyone that I know that works there, everyone who's managed that works there a long time, they have some weird shit happen to them.
I got my blanket.
Weird shit. Like they see someone in the kitchen and they go to say something to them, they turn around, and then they turn back again, the person's gone.
Right.
Weird.
Right.
Like old friends
I've heard about
this, forever, like wandering through the hallway, and they go up the stairs and you can't find them. There's like a bunch of stories like that. Now, granted, there's a lot of people who've done a lot of drugs at the Comedy Store.
Right.
That has to be factored in.
Right.
Joe Rogan is referring to the Comedy Store in West Hollywood. The Comedy Store is a famous comedy club that opened in the 1970s, but the building was built in the 1930s. It was originally a nightclub, and it's said that the mafia used to be involved with the business.
The mafia was
an
in
author
LA.
who used to be a waitress at the Comedy Store who claims that the Comedy Store is haunted from basement to the rafters.
Is that stupid for me?
The author
I thought the mafia was only like New York, New Jersey, Chicago.
previously told stories about her paranormal encounters. She claims that each night before they opened, all of the waitresses would set up the tables. You know, they would put on tablecloths,
what was that
ashtrays, glasses, etc. And she said that there were many times where a waitress would set the table, would leave for a little bit, they would come back to the table, and the tablecloth would be taken off the table and sitting there folded. Not to mention, most comedians who have performed at the Comedy Store all have their own paranormal encounters.
There's so many stories worldwide of ghosts. I don't think it's impossible to... I think it's possible that things leave a memory, right? Like,
I could see that, maybe. But I don't know. There's just been too many coincidences. It'd be too many coincidences.
Maybe if you hate someone so much, you leave a memory on the space. Like,
that's a stone tape theory.
Yeah. The what? Stone tape?
Yeah.
Stone
Post Malone just knows all this.
What is
that? That the energy of a life is like left on material shit.
Right.
The bricks on the wall.
Yeah.
Or the curtain here.
Right.
You know, I don't know if that's a stone tape theory. Don't quote me on that. Can you look up the stone tape theory for me?
Stone tape.
What is it?
Post Malone refers to the stone tape theory to try and explain why people say that places have memories. It's a common phrase that paranormal investigators use. For example, for a haunted house, they could say that the house holds memories, or the walls hold memories. Now, the stone tape theory is a pseudoscientific idea that ghosts and hauntings occur when historical information is released from objects such as rocks. It suggests that certain materials like limestone, quartz, and other stones,
big stones,
can store information about historical events. When
imagine like the ancient times, if that's true, like all the Roman
information is released, it can cause a residual haunting, which is
crazy.
when the past event is quote-unquote replayed in the present. The theory also suggests that building materials can absorb energy and then replay it at a later time. So for example, if someone was murdered in a house, the building materials absorbed that energy, and then at some point that energy was replayed from the building materials, deeming the house haunted.
That's interesting.
Friends with Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures, right?
Oh.
And it's like,
did he ever take you to a haunted house?
We did a whole episode.
Yo, didn't he almost die? He like went to see Robert the Doll, I think. He like looked him in the eyes and like did all this weird stuff on plane home or something. Like the plane almost crashed and it was like a lot of bad luck.
You check it out.
Did you get scared?
It's terrifying. It's terrifying, man. And in his museum, so apparently there's a thing called the Dybbuk box.
Or the Dybbuk box.
Which is one of the most...
Sam and Colby saw this. I watched it. Yo, shout out to Sam and Colby.
Haunted items in the world, apparently. And he wanted to... So
Creepy.
we took the glass...
Oh, by the way, when I'm 18, y'all better be expecting a Conjuring video, because we going there. With those equipment.
Glass case off of the Dybbuk box, which is in his museum in Vegas. And he thought it was a sick-ass idea to put the ashes of a lady who died while she was possessed on top.
Whoa.
Why would he do that? How did he saw someone die while they were possessed? That's insane.
And then my plane almost crashed.
Yeah, I heard this.
I was in a car accident. My house got robbed, and I had bite marks on my arm.
The Dybbuk box is an antique wine cabinet that is claimed to be haunted by a Dybbuk, or an evil spirit. The story goes that a man named Kevin Mannis purchased an old...
Oh, let me tell y'all another scary story. So it was me and my buddies, right? We were playing this game called Cat Scratch. Like, you read off the thing while the person who's like being told it to is laying in your lap, and you rub their temple while you're reading out that story. And after the story, you're supposed to get up and look to the back. It's supposed to be cat scratches. I shit you not. My buddy Joey, he literally had red marks all down his back, and he doesn't believe in this stuff. He goes, it's bullshit. He did it, scratches all down his back. He was freaked out the rest of the night, and like he just like was on his bed like just 100 mile stare. And then my buddy Brody, he's like terrified of this stuff. He's like a big dude, muscular. And he's like terrified of this stuff. And later that night, like at 2 a.m, when we're talking about like what happened earlier in the night, once we mentioned the Cat Scratch, the game or whatever, my buddy, he had Christmas lights zip tied up to the ceilings. and they all literally just fell when we mentioned the name, and it was so scary.
Wide cabinet from the granddaughter of a recently deceased Holocaust survivor named Havela, who escaped Nazi-occupied Poland. Havela's parents, brothers, sister, husband, 2 sons, and daughter were all killed.
Oh my gosh.
She, with other survivors, fled to Spain and lived there until the end of the war. When Havela, who lived to 103, immigrated to the United States, the wine cabinet was only one of 3 items that she brought with her. As Manus paid for the cabinet, Havela's granddaughter said, "I see you bought the debuk box." Manus wasn't familiar with the term. The granddaughter told him her grandmother always kept it shut and out of reach because there was a debuk, which in Jewish folklore is an evil, restless spirit that possesses the living.
Great.
The seller purportedly told Manus it to never be opened.
That's awesome.
And if it was, bad things would happen. Now, Manus bought this box and gave it to his mother, Ida. Ida described feeling a cold breeze from the box as she opened its doors,
hell no.
then experiencing pure evil coming out when she opened it. She says she
he has it open right there.
Had a stroke.
The fuck?
He hit the wall like I've never seen someone in fear so hard as whenever he touched it. And
isn't Post Malone like a country dude now?
I don't know if it's someone who's dead or if it's a demon or if it's something dimensional, but it's something there that goes bump in the night, I suppose.
On the Joe Rogan Experience number 2020, featuring Python Cowboy, Python Cowboy tells Joe Rogan how he found a satanic ritual site. Now, Python Cowboy is known for removing invasive species like pythons and iguanas from the Florida Everglades. He also documents his work on his YouTube channel. Now, Joe and Python Cowboy first get into a discussion about the Florida Everglades, where Joe says that it would be a really good place to hide stuff. Now, Python Cowboy tells Joe
imagine all the bodies you might see out
found in the Florida Everglades.
I've found vehicles that were used in crimes dumped out there. I've found dogs from dog fights that were dumped out there. I've found animals that have just been dumped. I've found very intricate and mind-blowing satanic rituals and sacrifices out there.
What the fuck?
Oh yeah. So I was, which I found different stuff before. You know, I'll find maybe where someone was doing some voodoo, some Santeria, sacrificed a chicken, whatever.
What the fuck?
All that's
He's
like
seen all this?
normal out there. That's not that crazy.
Normal.
But what I found this night was very
who?
crazy. Yeah, the police came and investigated it.
Oh my gosh.
Made the news.
On this specific night, Python Cowboy was python hunting at an abandoned Aerojet facility. Now,
What
at
is
this
that?
facility, Aerojet developed rockets during the Cold War. Then the facility
nuclear
got
stuff?
abandoned. Now, Python Cowboy says that you needed permission to be on the premises, but many teenagers and other people would sneak in and do things like spray paint the facility. Python
Stupid
Cowboy
teens,
also
bro.
claims that there have been murders and gang initiations
Stupid
at the
teens.
abandoned facility.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. So we go out there. The first thing I came across was a big rock pile with a upside down.
Oh hell no!
cross on
See,
top,
I would have been on.
and a bunch of red spray painted upside down crosses all over.
I would have
You can
left
tell the cross
right then
was
and there.
burnt a little bit, and it wasn't crazy, super crazy. It was like, oh, this is
Hell
new.
no.
This wasn't out here a few days ago.
Baby
And
dolls.
then I found this little doll.
Nope.
And as I kind of investigated that doll more, a little red scarlet snake actually came up and wrapped around her neck. And I picked up this. There it is. I picked up the scarlet snake. And
Damn. She
which
slithered
it
away.
was kind of weird that there's a
Sound like
live
Bad
snake,
Omen?
a red snake on this doll. And I've caught a lot of snakes in my life, and that is the only one that was bleeding out of its anus. There was blood coming out of its beehole.
Now, after doing some research, a red scarlet snake bleeding from its anus is a serious sign that likely indicates a significant health issue.
Oh my
so
gosh.
the snake that Python Cowboy found could have just had
That's
a
like
serious
really
health
bad
issue,
omen.
or as you will hear from Python Cowboy, could be something more demonic. When Python Cowboy
Fuck
arrived
no.
at the facility, there were these words
And he's
spray
still there
painted in
just
red
by
in the
himself.
gravel. It was a Latin saying. It translated to "Turn around, run, hide, he is watching you."
Who the fuck
Go
is
further
watching?
into the complex, and
Further?
there's these big abandoned buildings.
Now, why would you
I
do
go
that?
into the building, still just python hunting.
Why would you do that?
Who knows what these kids are doing out here? I thought it was strange, the Latin. Your average kid just messing around don't know Latin sayings like that. And then I come to this big room where there's the big pentagram. In the middle of the pentagram, there is a a 3-legged plastic chair with a blood stain in the bottom of it.
Oh, hell no.
Tell something was killed, sacrificed, whatever. On each wall, there's 3 walls. On each wall, there's upside down crosses, Latin sayings, and all kinds of stuff.
Dude, what?
As I'm kind of walking into the room, which, you know, I don't want to sound like a psycho or anything, but that doll from earlier,
was it there?
Grabbed my leg.
What?
I don't know if I kicked it, I didn't see it, or what. But that doll from the rock pile somewhere else, I don't know if it was another doll or what. I never seen that other doll. I kick it. It seemed like it grabbed me. It's that same doll from earlier.
What
same thing with
fuck?
the cross
Nah,
on
he
his
lying,
forehead,
bruh.
the one eye cocked
No doll
over,
grabbed
the other
you.
eye messed up.
So Python
No
Cowboy
way.
was in a large room with a pentagram on the
No
floor and a
way.
chair in the middle that has a blood stain. Not to mention the doll in there that apparently grabbed his leg. Now, probably the scariest part from this story is the writing that was next to the pentagram.
Saying on the
What does it
ground
say?
that says, "The omen will follow," which to me was like the creepiest thing of the whole thing. Was like, you know, that if
It'll
you
follow you.
interact with any of this spirit's gonna follow you.
Now, as Python Cowboy and his team explored this facility even further, they stumbled across a room, and in the room there was a sleeping bag with something inside of it. Now, they didn't investigate the sleeping bag, but they did report it to the police. But in that same room, in large red spray paint, it said, "She was only 9, we gave her to the devil." Now, what Python Cowboy found that night could have just been teenagers who were messing around out there, or it seriously could have been a demonic ritual. On the Joe Rogan Experience number 1424, featuring Tom Papa, Joe and Tom talk about a myriad of things surrounding paranormal activity. The first thing they discuss is how a lot of ghost hunting shows and books are all fake.
Here's the problem with ghosts. Those ghost shows.
Well, yes.
Those ghost shows are bullshit.
100%.
One of those guys got in trouble recently because he made a ghost book and he like plagiarized a bunch of
Oh, shit.
Really?
like blatant like copy and paste. Yeah.
Yeah, jeez. Yep.
Joe was talking about how an author was
Didn't
involved
one of
in a
these dudes, I think the
plagiarism
beard dude,
scandal,
his
but
wife
there
tried
are
to
many
hire
paranormal
him, man.
investigators who have been outed as
fucked
frauds.
up.
For example, Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are probably the most famous paranormal investigators, and they have faced many controversies throughout their years. Now, the whole Conjuring movie series is about them. Now, many people have accused the Warrens of fabricating their cases or exaggerating events for the fame and for the money. They have also been accused of inserting themselves into high-profile paranormal cases and turning them into books, movies, and lectures. People argue that they took advantage of grieving or stressed families for their own benefit, and Ed and Lorraine Warren have been accused of literally faking some events in some of their investigations.
For real? I didn't
again,
know
to
that.
make their stories more scary for the fame and for the money.
Theater ghosts are some of my
In
favorite.
theaters.
When you
Theater
go,
ghost.
right? When you go perform in these theaters and you talk to the people, I always ask, do you have a ghost? Yeah. There was a little boy, I was in, where was I? Oshkosh.
Where's that at?
Oshkosh. And there was an old theater, and the guy who runs the theater said, that, you know, there's legendary, they keep talking about, there's like 3 ghosts in the thing, and they were having a cocktail party upstairs in this like cocktail lounge off the balcony, and his son, this guy's son, ran into the balcony, and he's talking with people. He goes, I gotta go get him. And he goes in there, and the kid's leaning over the balcony, talking to the stage, having a conversation with someone. He's like,
hell
yeah, no, this is my dad. What? He wants us to go down there. He's, who wants us to go? That guy. He wants us to go down
Dude,
there.
if my son ever did
There's
that,
no
but
one
like,
down there.
The
You know,
thought
their
about
imaginary
that with little
friends.
kids
Oh,
is
hell
that
no.
little kids have not dulled all of their senses with the pressures of the world
Is that
and all
what
the
it
other
is?
information that we carry around in our heads and all of our ideas of what's real and what's not real, and that little kids are open more, and then they can see things.
Now, there are a few reasons why children could see ghosts more often than adults. Like Joe Rogan said, it could be because children don't have as much real-world experience and they don't know what's real or not real. An adult could see something quote-unquote paranormal but not think much of it and brush it off. But if a child saw something, they are more likely to believe what they saw. Another highly probable explanation could be that kids have highly active imaginations and often blur the line between reality and fantasy, and they're more suggestible than adults. Children could also have heightened sensory perception, which allows them to pick up on sounds, shadows, or environmental cues that most adults would overlook. Their developing brains might interpret unfamiliar stimuli as ghostly due to the fact that they don't have much life experience. And for the more paranormal explanation, Some paranormal believers think that children are more open to the spirit world because they haven't been conditioned to ignore or dismiss supernatural occurrences. Young children could be more in tune with unseen energies or spirits because their consciousness is still developing. On the Joe Rogan Experience number 1957 featuring Shane Gillis, Joe Rogan tells 2 stories of how he almost was abducted as a child. Now, his first story happened when he was about 7 or 8 years old.
That was the scary. Well, they were both pretty scary, but that was the scarier one because I was at the library and I was by myself. I was a latchkey kid. My parents just let me out of the house, which, at the time was kind of normal. In retrospect, like thinking about it now, like I couldn't imagine letting my 7-year-old just fucking library. Wander around. Not just that, but walk to the public library.
Definitely in today's age. Oh my God,
hell no. It's actually very interesting how people always talk about how back in the day, themselves or their kids would just, play outside or go wander around without any parental supervision. Nowadays, it's pretty rare for a parent to let their kid wander. It's interesting because the reports of missing children have actually fallen 40% since the 90s, according to the FBI National Crime Information Center. Now, of course, this study was in 2014. But it's just interesting to think that either the number of child abductions have gone down because
it's been 11 years
letting their kids wander around, or that there is more education about ways to prevent child abductions. Now, there are other factors as well, such as technology advancement, law enforcement tactics, and public awareness. I always just find it interesting how throughout generations, the concept of letting their kids wander without parental supervision has changed so drastically.
And this guy, I was looking at, I was always into like horror movies and monster movies. And
Stephen King.
And so I was reading these books in this, they had a section of like, monster books.
Yeah.
And this guy came up to me and he goes, do you like monster books? I go, yeah. And he goes, oh, I have some monster books in my car. You want to see them? I'm
no.
Like, okay. Like, I didn't know any better. I was
creepy ass dude, bro.
8 years old or whatever it was. And as I'm leaving with this guy, the librarian starts screaming, Joseph, you get away from that man.
Oh, my gosh.
That man just got out of jail. And she yells at him to get out of there, and the guy runs away, and I just started crying.
She's sick.
Yeah.
Wait, that's actually crazy.
Now, Joe Rogan begins to tell a second story from when he was only 13 years old. Him and one of his friends used to always hang out at this lake. Now, there was a guy that Joe and his friend used to talk to. This guy was a runner and would always be at the lake running around when Joe and his friend were there. Now, this guy seemed like a really normal guy. He was about 60 years old, and he was a retired school teacher. But one day, the normal conversations that Joe used to have with this older guy switched into something not so normal.
And one day, it's just me.
He went for it.
One day, it's just me. And I'm fishing, and he comes by, and he's drunk.
Is this a ghost story, though?
And
or is this just
he tells me he loves me. And I'm like super confused.
How old were you?
13.
Oh, hell
and
no.
I had been talking to this guy on and off. I had seen him, for months.
Yeah.
Like, he'd come by, say hi. It was always, like, casual, very good-humored, very friendly, but he was, like, setting us up. And he comes by, and then I realize after, he tells me he loves me, but there can be no love without
what?
That's what he says. And I'm like, what?
Freak ass dude.
And I had a knife. So I remember, like, I grabbed my knife in my pocket.
Why is he laughing
and
at
my hand
that?
on my knife, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to stab this guy.
Damn.
Yeah. I was like, this is gonna, because there was no one around. There was no one around.
Wow.
It was just trees and
You were 13.
forest.
You were like, I'm gonna have to stab.
Oh, I was gonna cut this guy.
I would have trusted the guy. I would have been like, yeah, you're right.
You're smarter than
Well,
me.
I'll see you later. I don't know what.
On the Joe Rogan Experience number 1351, featuring Dan Aykroyd, Dan Aykroyd briefly talks about how he spends a lot of time up in Canada, where him and his dad have an old farmhouse. Now, apparently, the farmhouse is haunted.
I'm there with my dad in Canada a lot, and we have the old family farm, but with the haunted farmhouse, and I've got
Is
a book
it haunted?
for you. Well, let me say that there's residual energy from the people who've lived there in the past. So you hear footsteps and voices and creaks and doors closing and that, and many people have had experiences in it. So
now this prompts Joe and Dan to talk about how in very few states there is a law that requires people selling their home to disclose if anybody has, died or was murdered in
I've heard about
this. It's
this.
called a death disclosure requirement. For example, in California, a death in a home has to be disclosed to potential buyers, but the law is very wary. Apparently, you only have to disclose it if there was a tragic death, like a murder. If someone lived a long, happy life and passed away in a home, you don't have to disclose it. Now, apparently, Dan had to disclose that somebody died in a house that he was selling in Los Angeles. Even with disclosing that the house was haunted, he still sold the house. And the person who lives there now has publicly talked about the paranormal things that go on inside the house.
You know, jewelry will hop around on the table, shapes will be seen, you'll feel a touch in the shoulder, that kind of thing. The staff felt it. I had an experience one night where something got into bed with me. I was alone, and I don't know what went on there, but I just figured
Sexually?
well,
You fucked a ghost?
I think I was being come on to there, but anyway,
this is a YouTube clip. Right
that house,
now, Dan Aykroyd ghost.
Well, or it did try to come on to me, and I didn't refuse its.
So you resisted?
You know what? I just snuggled up next to it and went to sleep.
You spooned with
it.
it.
Fuck?
I did. I felt a shake.
Cuddle with
I
it.
looked and saw the depression in the I saw the depression in
It's
the mattress,
freaky ass
and
dude.
I felt a shake. Something next to me, like felt a form next to me, and I
you hammered?
I nuggled. No, not that night. I was working on a picture and went to bed early.
Now, Dan says that there were 2 spirits living in the house, and one night his daughter saw one of these spirits late at night.
And my daughter saw him walking with a little red-haired girl down the hall once, and you know, we think that he might have been there. But anyway, when we sold the house to Beverly, there was right in the California real estate document that we had to sign. By law, you have to divulge any unusual activity in the house. So I had to sign a clause in there that said, yes, at the beginning of our tenure in the house, we did have experience. Yeah.
Now, after doing some research, I also found that Dan had talked about some more paranormal things that went on in that house. Apparently, he had a Stairmaster in the house, and it would just like randomly turn on. There was also a piano in their house, and at random times, keys would be played, and you know, when Dan would go and look, there wouldn't be anybody at the piano. And he has many instances of doors being slammed. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know
that was a good video.
if you'd like to see a part 2.
Go like and subscribe, Jax. You know where to find the video. Link in the description. See y'all in this one. Bye bye.